James, Tim, Tom, how are you? Welcome to Faded Black podcast.
Thank you.
Doing
Thank
good?
you. Thank you.
I guess my first thing is I watched the short this morning.
Wow.
Found it on YouTube. And I think there's a really interesting symmetry between Herb is having to revisit music from another time and you guys are having to revisit a piece of art from 18 years ago.
Yes.
What was that like? I guess what were your feelings initially around it and why you chose that particular story to bring to life again?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think the moral of the film, in some ways, is not to go back.
Yeah, we should have made it.
And that's exactly what we did. But I think, do you know what? I think that side of it, that sense of kind of the nostalgia that the characters feel about their old work and the nostalgia we feel about that film is something that's only really hit us once the film's been released and we've been watching it with people, and suddenly it's very emotional for us because it feels like, while it's a new film for the audience, it's tapping into something very old and very kind of seasoned for us. So it's a funny experience for us watching it because it does feel like it's been in the post for a very long time, this film, and elements of it are very, very old.
And it was always that film. There was never, it's not arbitrary that we went for that one. We made a few other short films and, did various things in the 2000s. But yeah, always weirdly, that short film has been one that we've kind of wistfully talked about in pubs, 5 years on, 10 years on, 15 to be fair. Yeah. And then eventually we made it. It was sort of never going anywhere that we would maybe try and go back to it. Just needed to unlock it, and think what the feature would be. And then still there was trepidation for sure. Was that the right thing to do? Even when we rolled, when we turned over the camera on the first day, yeah, there was definitely an element of thinking, should we go back?
Yeah,
it doesn't feel right.
It's true, isn't it? I think I share that with Tom and Tim's sentiments about it's kind of dawned on me since screening it for the first time, actually, how overwhelming that was to be kind of revisiting this piece of art and the journey, my personal journey, being very much like Herb's, creatively, just wanting to get back to that thing, and the driver was always there, like it was an itch I wanted to scratch and wanted to get back and work with these guys. It felt like a real kind of engine for me. I mean, it took a while to convince. They didn't have to convince them, but it took a while to get there, to work it all out.
But it's sort of.
But that's I can see that in Herb, that same, like, have I made the right decisions, relationships, work, creative, to be where I am? But then what it reminds you, I guess, is you end up where you're supposed to be at the time when you're supposed to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everything's for a reason.
Yeah.
I think there's a really interesting idea about like parasocial relationships with fans and the artists. And you could have easily gone this like Misery, Annie Wilkes way, comes to the island. But here you're kind of showing how an artist's relationship with their music might be different to a fan and what they imprint on that music. Yeah. I think everyone's got like some album that soundtrack their childhood or a relationship. So tell me a little bit about kind of like formulating that relationship and that dynamic and getting into the artist and fan kind of relationship.
I mean, I think the key thing is that it's such an unbalanced relationship, which is what makes it so ripe for comedy, I think, because you have one person who just loves the other. They're just obsessed with the other and knows him really well. And the other person for whom this person is a complete stranger, basically has never existed before. And so it's so unbalanced. And you're right, it does lend itself to that person being secretly evil or secretly weird. But in a way, it's almost more horrifying that they're not. They just love them. They just want to make the other person happy. But all their attempts to do so are just kind of a bit creepy and a bit like overwhelming because it's just such an artificial relationship to find yourself in. So I think that was always a huge part of the comedy of the idea was having this relationship that everyone understands straight away, the artist and the fan, but can also see the longing coming from Tim's character and the kind of slight revulsion coming from my character.
And it was we never considered it as a Wilkes vibe. It was always when there's a moment in the short film where you see my character just looking down at the house, and for me that feels like this film's about to turn, and it doesn't, because it was never our intention. But we never considered that and talked ourselves out of it. It was always, we knew it would be a relationship like the one that we put in the film, which is two people who are not meant to get on, and where it's a disaster, and then they sort of some warmth happens and they become, if not friends, there's certainly like there's a warm embrace at the end where they've made some headway.
But I think that tension that you mentioned is kind of useful for the film at the beginning, to kind of, for the audience not quite to, and for Herb to not really understand what he's walked into. It takes a while for him to realise that this guy isn't going to kill him. But it's like, but it was never an intention, but it's helpful to have a kind of, what is this guy? Who is this guy? And see it through Herb's eyes.
And I think there's something quite Hitchcockian about we as an audience know a little bit about what's going on than Herb, because I think one of the most beautiful things in your performance was just, it made me weep every time. You just staring at the camera like, ugh, it makes me want to weep now. But the audience is ahead of Herb as a character, and you kind of like just look at him, look at the clues going on about the relationship with Maria, and you're kind of hoping that kind of comes out. And like, pacing that again in the script, how much you show and how much you didn't want to show, and how much you wanted Herb to kind of just come to this realization at the end, like finding that dynamic. How was that working out those kinks?
It was interesting. I think that balance was something we always were just trying to stay across. The bigger things, the Nell side of things, that was all kind of trying to manage that kind of emotion in the middle of the film. But yeah, specifically my kind of backstory and how much he would see of that and how much the audience would see of it. That was one of the specific things we were looking at very hard. That we wrote more stuff about my past and my wife, and then dialed it down, and then dialed it back up, then down, and then eventually we did a reshoot in order to just dial it back up slightly to get it exactly where we needed it to be. And I think our instinct was it's got to be really down so you almost don't notice it. And actually we pushed it back up, and it was probably the right thing to do. But for us, it sort of feels quite counterintuitive to sort of say outright what's going on. But we did do that slightly, and I think it probably was useful.
As the film goes on, I think, a lot of credit has to go to Quinn, our editor, who was really across the sort of the emotional arcs of the film, and also did the sort of drip feeding of information. But I think what's lovely about it is the fact that obviously Charles is a character who can't stop talking, but he doesn't really talk about himself. He doesn't really talk about this. Even when Herb actually tries to ask him about it and is saying, well, who's we? Who are you talking about? Charles doesn't talk about it. And yeah, exactly.
Wicker.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's sort of, again, it's part of what's so endearing about Charles is that he's so giving. He's so like, he's just constantly filling silences, but he refuses to kind of make it about himself.
Yeah, and I think Nell also as a character is able to kind of disarm, which, this is very much Carey as well, but sort of disarm, or not only sort of start seeing Charles in a way that Herb kind of appreciates and starts to sort of soften to him when Nell arrives. Yeah. But also the fact that she has this connection with Charles that opens up, that he starts to open up to her. So it's kind of her addition that really starts to, peel back the layers for these two characters.
Well, I think it's interesting because obviously in the short, Nell's not a character in it, but in this you've added her as one. And I guess like something reminds me a little bit of like Damien Chazelle's like kind of the dominant male artist, and like, in La La Land or Whiplash, where it's like, I put my career before the relationship, and suddenly a relationship is seen as a knockback. And what does the female character do? And this one, I think it's, how what you just said there about Charles not being able to open up to Herb, but actually Nell comes along, and maybe there's a kind of dynamic that she's a woman, so it's easier, and men find it really difficult to talk to each other. I mean, I feel like maybe I'm talking at you, but I think it's like established. So I guess bringing in Nell as a character, because writing her, and was Carey involved in kind of how you played it and how she'd have some authorship on it? So just tell me a little bit about creating that dynamic between this like male artist, and then I guess for intensive purposes, someone who gives up her career the minute that Herb goes off.
Yeah, I think what she does, the character of Nell, and played so perfectly by Carey, is she does unlock it, because this guy just writes me off, writes Charles off, and I think she doesn't. She's just a warmer person, and she just immediately sees him as quite a fun person, funny person, and kind of eccentric, but also she just sees the best in people, and that unlocks him. Where you sort of imagine that he before was probably a nicer person when he was with her. They were probably a nice couple who were both like very, good fun. And she brings that back in. So yeah, I don't know. That's sort of what Nell does to him, and what Carey brings to the film is just adds this huge warmth and openness at the heart of it, which opens the whole world up.
Yeah, and I think also, what I hope comes across is that Charles's character gives Nell the confidence to go back to music, to go back to being creative and making art herself, having had her confidence knocked a bit by Herb going solo and having this kind of career without her, which admittedly has been quite, compromised in many ways. I think by the end of the film, the thing she's got out of it is that sense that actually she can do this by herself, and that she wants to maybe give it another go.
Well, as someone who's been teaching myself the ukulele for the last 6 months,
Sure.
I felt very seen. And I guess I'd love to just on a final note to talk about, hey man, I've got calluses on my finger now. I feel like a full musician.
You have the ukulele with you?
You know what? I very nearly brought it today because I need to put knobs on. My brother got me a strap, so I need to go to Denmark Street.
Yeah.
But I guess the songs in it are beautiful. I've been listening to the soundtrack since Friday when I saw the film. I think it's so beautiful. And obviously you had Raspberry Fair and Sky Child, which kind of reminds me of Nightman Cometh. I don't know why in my head, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. They do the musical episode.
I haven't seen that one.
Not seen it? Okay,
I've seen that
go
show
back.
a lot. I haven't seen that one. Okay.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, now it's in my head. I might be an earworm,
Okay.
but just talk to me about a bit writing those songs. Are you writing them as Herb, or are you writing them as Tom? How did you kind of do the album?
It's a combination, to be honest. I mean, as you point out, some are from the short, and then some are ones I've written as Tom. Later over
Which
the
ones?
years. No, not doing that. That I've then retooled for the film, and then some probably about half I've written in the lead up to the film as Herb, where I'm both the music and the lyrics are an opportunity to kind of tell a backstory and sort of, bring out a kind of a sense of the band and the emotions that went into that relationship. In the knowledge that the characters would never talk about it directly, but the music can kind of convey it. So it's a combination of things that have led to all those songs. But I'm very happy that they now belong to Herb rather than to me, to be honest.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for all the snack references. That was exactly my Pickled Onion Monster Munch, Calippo, and Reese's Pieces.
Okay.
I my favourite. I was like,
This film was written for you.
it was officially. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.